So I started getting interested in stories, 30 years ago, 35 years ago or so. My wife and I, when we got married, I used to make cowboy coffee. I'd take a graniteware pot, a pot like that, and fill it up about 2/3 of water, and carefully measure several handfuls of coffee into it, put it on the burner, and you set it to boil, and you wait, it boils and boils, and when it rolls over, you take it off the heat, you add another cup of cold water, let it sit for a couple minutes, and you take a spoon and you bang the side of the coffee pot, and that settles out any grounds that are kind of in there suspended, maybe with an air bubble or something, and you have yourself some really good coffee. I mean, it's the best coffee you want to drink. The trouble is, it takes so doggone long. When I get up in the morning, I want a cup of coffee as soon as possible. Well, they invented drip coffee pots that had built-in timers, and that was really wonderful. I mean, the coffee, it was all right, but the idea of waking up in the morning to the smell of coffee and going out and getting that first cup of coffee before anything else happens was really wonderful. But then the coffee pot broke. We had it for about a year. The timer went out on it. So we'd have to manually switch it on in the morning. Oh, yeah, the pain. And I was talking about this with my sister, who was living in Little Rock, Arkansas at the time. I was complaining about this coffee pot. I said, oh man, it was great, but the timer broke, and oh shoot, I don't want to buy another coffee pot. She said, send it back to me and I'll take it back to Wal-Mart. And I said, I didn't buy it at Wal-Mart, and even if I did, I don't have a receipt or the original box. And she said, oh no, she said, it's our policy that if you have an appliance that breaks, and we sell the same make and model, we will replace it free of charge, no questions asked. Now this is about the time when some of my liberal friends go, oh, Walmart, and their eyes roll back because Walmart is the evil empire of the retail world now, apparently. But my sister said that was a policy. In fact, she said, Sam Walton came to our store, and this was back in the early 1980s, and he told us a story about a woman who had brought a toaster in that was melted. Her house had burned down, and her toaster was just a lump, but you look underneath, and the make and the model was there. She brought it into Walmart, wanted to exchange it for another toaster. The manager said, oh gosh, ma'am, I'm sorry. I realize your toaster doesn't work, but it's not your toaster's fault. I mean, I'm sorry your house burned down, but we can't just replace this toaster. Well, Sam Walton got wind of that, and he went to that store, called the store manager up in front of all the employees, and read him the riot act. He said, that isn't our policy. Our policy is that if you have an appliance that does not work, we have the same make and model, we will give you a new one free of charge, no questions asked. Because it's not about a $10 toaster at all. It's about customer loyalty. And I was just stunned. Here was my sister, a low-level Walmart employee, who could explain Walmart's exchange policy, and not only the policy, she could explain the value behind that policy. And I got to thinking, I wasn't sure I knew any Forest Service employee who could explain a Forest Service policy or the value behind that policy. And our leadership did not walk around on the national forests telling us these kinds of stories. Now that's not that I didn't hear any stories, because I heard stories, out marking timber with the crew in the middle of the winter. We'd build a lunch fire at noon so we could toast our peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. They told stories. They told stories about guys who got caught drinking on the job and got time off without pay. And the old guys said, man, I could use 30 days of time off without pay. It wouldn't bother me a bit. So I learned a little about incentives and disincentives. They told stories about guys who got drunked up on a Saturday night, put their truck out in the marsh, couldn't get it out, so they walked up to the Forest Service warehouse, unlocked it, got out the four-wheel drive with the winch, went down, winched their vehicle out of the marsh, and got caught by the county sheriff, and they lost their job. So It was a little bit instructive. Man, if I ever go out on Saturday night, get all drunked up, put my truck in the marsh, don't count on using the Forest Service vehicle to get it out. Now, the ones that they also told stories about guys who had screwed up on such a grand scale that the only way to get rid of them was to promote them and send them to Washington, D.C. And this latter part, this was usually some young guy that came in with some brand new idea about how to do something, and upper managers would be just thrilled with it, and it meant that the old guys had to change the way they did things. And they just go, why? It didn't make sense to them. And they'd do it the new way until they finally got rid of the young guy, sent him to Washington, D.C., and then the old guys went back to doing things the way they always did. So I learned something there, too. In thinking about this, we had Gifford Pinchot's 11 Maxims. Now, Gifford Pinchot was the guy that started the Forest Service way back in the early 1900s, and he was kind of an environmentalist. He was an environmentalist at that time because he had read Man and Nature, a book published in 1876 about the decline of civilizations in the world based on the loss of their forests. And he thought, man, the Department of Interior is giving away land. That was their job, so he started the forest reserves, and he put it in the Department of Agriculture instead of the Department of Interior. And they started reserving lands from a Homestead Act, make sure that they stayed in the public ownership. And this was great, and he had like 11 maxims, and they were posted on some of our offices. Like a forester should not try sly and foxy politics. A forester is not a politician. Don't be afraid to give credit to somebody else, even if you deserve it, because you can get more done by giving other people credit. Don't try to run the public. Your job is to serve the public. And these were great. It was like the 10 Commandments, only we had 11. But we did not have a Bible to back it up. 10 Commandments, you had a Bible, and you had people telling you parables. Here's the story. Here's a story. Here's a story. Here's another story from the Bible about what's right, what's good. But we didn't have a Bible. We had Pinchot's Maxims, but we had no leaders walking around telling us stories about what was good and what was bad. That got me interested in stories in the U.S. Forest Service. And I always asked for stories, and I didn't get many stories. Because the job was, here's the job, go get it done. When you're done with it, come back, we'll give you another job. If you don't agree with the job, find another job. Just put your head down, go do it. Okay, so that's what I learned from all that. I started kind of collecting stories, and I tried collecting stories from the old foresters and old biologists, and they weren't very forthcoming. So I thought, well, maybe my own career will be a source of stories that somebody can learn from in the future. Things that they did not teach me in ranger school. Thanks for coming. You've been wonderful.